Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. As many as 750,000 federal workers are sidelined by the government shutdown. The White House signals looming irreversible mass layoffs because of a congressional funding disagreement. Some of those affected are Native American employees. Meanwhile, tribes are faced with payment disruptions, contract interruptions, law enforcement staffing questions, and other problems. We'll check on what to expect as the shutdown gets underway right after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. The president of the Oglala Sioux Tribe has denounced the decision by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth not to revoke medals awarded for one of history's most infamous massacres. Brian Bull of Buffalo's Fire has more.
In late December 1890, members of the 7th Cavalry attempted to disarm a large group of Chief Spotted Elk's followers they had encircled at Wounded Knee Creek, South Dakota. A shot went off, and the soldiers mowed down the group of largely Native women, children, and elders with rifles and powerful Hotchkiss guns. 25 soldiers were killed by friendly fire as well. Later investigations showed fleeing survivors were chased down and killed where they stood. The following year, 20 U.S. soldiers received the Medal of Honor for gallantry at Wounded Knee, but top brass, including Major General Nelson A. Miles, condemned the incident as, quote, the most abominable military blunder and a horrible massacre of women and children. Efforts to revoke the medals gained momentum starting in 1990, the centennial of the incident. But in a video posted to his X account last week, Secretary Hegseth said the 20 soldiers who fired upon the Lakota natives will not have their medals revoked.
We're making it clear that they deserve those medals. This decision is now final, and their place in our nation's history is no longer up for debate.
We'll continue to fight to get these medals rescinded.
Oglala Sioux Tribal President Frank Starr comes out as a descendant of Spotted Elk and a Marine veteran of the Gulf War and Mogadishu. He says he's not surprised by Hegseth's decision, but it still speaks to the indifference of those who don't know their history.
It's despicable, it's untruthful, and insulting to our people.
In a press release, the Oglala Sioux Tribe says descendants of those scarred by Wounded Knee have served honorably in every U.S. conflict from World War I to Afghanistan. And every year, an annual memorial ride is held to honor those killed at Wounded Knee. Again, Frank Starr comes out.
This is history. This is something that our people are traumatized with, and we have to live with that. And I keep saying this every time I go to Washington to advocate not only for the Oglala Sioux Tribe, and tribes nationwide. You know, we were never dealt a fair hand.
Meanwhile, the National Congress of American Indians has also denounced Hegseth's decision and are calling on the U.S. Congress to pass what's called the Remove the Stain Act, so that, quote, the nation's highest honor fulfills its namesake by reflecting courage, not cowardice and cruelty. For National Native News, I'm Brian Bull.
The Belfast City Council in Ireland approved a historic policy for the island's Indigenous language, as Show McPullen reports.
Belfast City Councillors approved the new Irish language policy this week. It comes after years of advocacy and consultations with the Indigenous language community. The city plans to redesign its logo to now include the original Irish spelling of Béal Fíorste, which means mouth of the Sandbank Ford. The policy also pledges to ensure all city signs contain both languages. Far-right councillors tried to block the new policy, but were unsuccessful. The council previously earmarked the equivalent of $2.5 million to fund the changes, as well as new initiatives that remove barriers for the use of Irish in public life. The Irish language has been experiencing a renaissance of late, particularly among young speakers, in part thanks to the worldwide success of the Belfast band Kneecap. For National Native News, I'm Show McPullen in Ireland.
The Cherokee Nation partnered with DreamWorks Animation and NBC Universal to dub the animated film How to Train Your Dragon in the Cherokee language. The Oklahoma tribe held a private screening of the film this week, which is streaming on Peacock. It's part of the tribe's Cherokee language preservation efforts. I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Support by AARP. AARP creates and connects people to unique tools and programs, helps conserve personal resources, and tackles issues that matter most to individuals, families, and communities. More at aarp.org.
Support by Sonosky Chambers Law, championing tribal sovereignty and Native American rights since 1976. From opioids litigation to treaty rights to tribal self-governance. With offices in Washington, D.C., New Mexico, California, and Alaska. Sonosky Chambers Law.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. On the second day of the federal government shutdown, tribes and individual Native Americans are sorting out what it means for their daily lives. For hundreds of Native federal employees deemed non-essential, it means they are out of work for the duration. And the White House is looking at the possibility of permanent mass layoffs of many of those employees. The shutdown also means payments to tribes for federal contracts, BIA law enforcement, food distribution to schools, and health care access could all be disrupted until members of Congress can work out an agreement. This is the second government shutdown in the past decade. The previous one stretched into the new year and was the longest on record. Today, we'll take a look at the landscape heading into the shutdown from Native political and leadership experts. Of course, you as a listener can join our conversation as well. Will the shutdown impact you or your community? If so, in what way and to what degree? You can call us at 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Let's now meet today's guests. Joining us from the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe Reservation in northern Michigan, we have Aaron Payment. He is a tribal councilman and former chairperson for the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians. He's also on the National Congress of American Indians Executive Committee and the former first vice president of NCAI. Of course, he's a tribal member as well of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians. Aaron, hello, and welcome back to the show.
Ani, bonjour. Glad to hear your voice in Indian summer, and we take credit for Indian summer.
Right on, brother. Great to have you back on the show. Joining us in the studio in Albuquerque, New Mexico, we have Sue Parton. She is the president of the Federation of Indian Service Employees. She's Kiowa. Sue, hello, and welcome back to the show. Great to have you in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Joining us from Washington, D.C. is A.C. Locklear. He is the CEO of the National Indian Health Board. He is Lumbee. A.C., you're a frequent guest as well. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And our fourth guest joins us from Tulsa, Oklahoma, Mike Stopp. He is the president and CEO of 7 Star Holdings, LLC. He is Cherokee and Muskogee. Mike, always great to have you on the show, too. Welcome back to Native America Calling.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Happy to be here.
Sure. Well, Aaron, I want to begin with you. Please, can you give our listeners a sense of how the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians is being affected right now by this shutdown?
Yes, but I first want to recognize the good work of the National Indian Health Board, National Congress of American Indians, and National Council of Urban Indian Health, who in 2022 instigated the passage of the advanced appropriations, which the Trump administration budget tried to eliminate earlier this year, but fortunately we have Tom Cole and others that shielded it. That will insulate us to some extent from the cuts or the shutdown for Indian Health Service. So what my tribe is doing, when the first shutdown happened in about 2013, we didn't move quickly enough in order to protect our IHS-funded positions. We lost 2 doctors, 2 nurse practitioners, and 2 other medical staff. Subsequently, over the years, we have passed stopgap measures to insulate health staff from government shutdowns and other staff from shutdowns. But what it means is we have to dip into our fund equity without any guarantee that we're going to be paying them back or get paid back and replenish that fund. And so Right now, we're suffering because of, we're a border town on the border of Canada. We're suffering because of the instigated conflict over tariffs. A lot of our Canadian customers are not coming here now. We were at the worst point, 40% down. Now we're only about 27% down, but financially, it's going to be a big hit, even though we will be living off of our fund equity.
Aaron, how is this shutdown different from the last one back in 2018?
Well, again, a big one is because of the insulation of Indian Health Services. So tribes will be able to some extent tolerate that because of advance appropriations, and that was very wise. And again, that team effort that pushed that to get that across the finish line. It's almost like we're getting normalized with these government shutdowns and not as stressed about it, but it's nonetheless a very significant and real thing. It is an abrogation of the treaty and trust obligation. Interrupting our funding is not acceptable. It's like not paying your rent or your mortgage. The federal government, we ceded Indian Territory 2 billion acres for health, education, and social welfare. We can't really evict anybody, so we expect that they will be true to their word and honor the treaty and trust obligation and be on time by paying the rent.
What about federal employees that you have there in Sault Ste. Marie? Can you give us a number about how many you have, and do you have any plans for how those folks can be assisted in the event of a prolonged shutdown?
Yeah, so the one other thing that's different is I think in 19, Congress passed that if you are considered essential, a federal employee that's considered essential and you have to work without pay, that you will be made whole once the government reopens. But while that legislation was passed under a different composition of the House and Senate and presidency, I'm not sure that that won't be repealed. There's no guarantee that those federal employees are going to be recompensated for the work that they do, but the pay they don't get. Also, furloughing people might sound like a good thing because you get a little vacation, but if you don't earn your pay and you're not able to pay your mortgage or your car payment, that's significant. The federal employees that work directly with tribes in this community used to be about 35 or almost 40. That has dropped significantly down, and we lost several during the beginning of this administration with the reductions in force, forced retirements. So right now we are down to like maybe 6 federal employees that serve Indian country, the local BIA and the local IHS sanitation office. We finally got some stabilization of that their rent's going to be paid, but for a while we didn't know that that was the case because they terminated leases. And so right now, the cumulative effect of reductions over time is that we're down to only about 6 team members, federal team members that serve Indian country.
Okay, and you mentioned that this furlough, this is not a vacation. And I know my wife was a federal employee back in 2018 during that long shutdown. And they made it very clear, look, you can't go out of town. You can't take a trip. You need to be there ready to report to work at a moment's notice if the shutdown ends. So it's a very, very uncertain time for many of these folks. Aaron, I think a lot of listeners are wondering, what would it take to make Indian programs and money going to tribes exempt from these government shutdown cuts and payment pauses? Is there any traction from the current administration to make something like that possible?
I'll give you my response, but I think my former colleague AC might be a little more attuned to what's happening. I do know, and I have talked to several of the new senior level positions that are Native American, and they're doing their level best to beat back some of the first approach of this administration is to announce 35% cuts across the board. The big beautiful budget had a bunch of devastating cuts for Indian country, but we've been pretty fortunate with Congressman Tom Cole as the House Appropriations Chair, and even with Senator Mark Wayne Mullins. I know he's kind of iffy with some people, but he is defensive of the treaty and trust obligation. So I think we've fared relatively well, but it's a constant battle. We have to start all over again. Indians 101, educating members of Congress of the treaty and trust obligation, that treaties are legal tender, that they're not based on welfare or reparations or even the worst of the worst conditions that we faced that leads to the worst of the worst outcomes, as published in the Broken Promises Report in 2018. It's owed to us, and it's incumbent on the federal government to uphold that. So we have worked on several strategies: mandatory funding, exempting tribes from sequestration, but really the next step is to come up with some sort of permanent leasehold fee that can be obligated to the federal government that would insulate it from even the budget ceilings during sequestration and entirely from government shutdowns. Just as we can't evict America from our lands, and every land you're on is Indian land in this country, and we can't evict them, so we expect that the Treaty and Trust obligation will be upheld forever.
Thank you, Aaron. A.C. Locklear with the National Indian Health Board. Please chime in. I'd like to get your insights with regard to exemptions possibly for Indian programs and Indian dollars.
Yeah, for sure. Right now, legislatively, I don't know of any real movement to move any other additional tribal programs to the mandatory or advanced appropriations. We see that it worked with Indian Health Service with advanced appropriations. I mean, we would like to see that move to mandatory. The difference is, with advanced appropriations, they still have to appropriate the funds on an annual basis. It's just done a year in advance, so that in the case of government shutdowns like this, we're still able to continue funding our health systems. Where mandatory, it's almost like your Medicare and Medicaid programs where it doesn't matter, it has to be funded one way or the other. It's not really reliant on that annual appropriations measure. So it's clear that all tribal programs need to be moved to that sort of mechanism, whether it's mandatory or expanding advanced appropriations. It's not just the health, while our clinics are open and our staff are being paid on the health side, we have our, justice, policing departments, housing, education, nutrition, all of that is subject to shutdowns. So tribes beyond, when we think about what we need to be healthy and we think about the well-being of our people, we don't want, while it's important that we have clinics that can treat someone when they're sick, having housing, having access to housing, having access to nutrition keeps people out of the hospitals and out of the clinics.
All right.
So it's just as important as they have access.
Okay. Thank you, AC. We're going to take a short break. We will come back and continue this conversation. And we've got the phone lines open, 1-800-99-NATIVE. Studying her language helped Choctaw singer-songwriter Samantha Crane reach a new level of creativity and confidence. She'll talk to us about her latest album, Gumshoe. And Cherokee artist Ken Pomeroy sings with a voice NPR says opens up dialogues with the listener. She'll discuss her album, Cruel Joke, when we add both artists to our Native playlist on the next Native America Calling.
Support provided by Amerind. Amerind is 100% tribally owned and partners with tribes and their businesses to provide affordable commercial insurance coverage, protect tribal sovereignty, and strengthen Native American communities by helping to keep dollars in Indian country. Information about property, liability, commercial auto, and workers' comp available at amerind.com. That's AMERIND.com.
We are glad you're with us today on Native America Calling. We're talking about the government shutdown that began this week. Is it affecting your life yet? Do you worry about ramifications down the road? Give us a call. Join this conversation. We're at 1-800-996-2848. 1-800-996-2848. That's the number. Just give us a call. Share your comments. Share your insights on the air. 1-800-99-NATIVE. Let's talk more about how this shutdown could potentially impact the Indian Health Service. Let's continue with A.C. Locklear with the National Indian Health Board. And AC, of course, IHS is deemed an essential service, so much of its programs and services continue. And it also has a new funding structure since the last federal shutdown in 2018. But where might people who rely on the Indian Health Service see some disruptions in the days and weeks ahead?
Yeah, for sure. Luckily, all the facilities should remain open because of the advance appropriations and because of third-party revenue from, insurance, we're able to cover staffing. We're able to cover all the necessary financial pieces for Indian Health Service. But outside of that, we're looking at our justice, our policing, different issues like that. So if there's, emergency, a lot of times that's, it goes through policing, it goes through dispatch, it goes through things like that. So these are all essential services that we have to really think about that are put at risk. And what happens is the tribe ends up, like Dr. Payment said, putting their resources to make sure those specific pieces aren't missed, and oftentimes they don't get that money paid back.
What are some IHS funding pools that have been paused? Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, the funding pools that have been paused really are things like the contract support costs and 105L leases. Those aren't being funded right now. Those are kind of on hold through that. There's also a couple of other accounts that aren't continuing, but those are pretty much going to be made up through third-party collections and carryover balances. So, things like the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act Fund, electronic health records line items, sanitation and facilities construction are all parts that aren't included within that advance appropriations measure. But those staffs that work in those areas, that work is able to continue because of carryover balances and that third-party collections.
Let's talk more about the leases. You just mentioned the funds for those are not secured. What does that mean, and how could that play out?
Yeah, so, those are really essential programs that allow for tribes to provide new facilities and construction for their clinics and other facilities. So, it really doesn't have a lot of impact on the day-to-day clinical aspects of receiving services. It really is a mechanism to allow tribes to have new and updated facilities in absence of Indian Health Services paying that back. So that really is more of a tribal health function. So you really don't see a lot of that interplaying directly with direct service.
What about tribes who 638 their health services? Could there be an impact there?
Yeah, there could potentially be an impact if they have any, federal folks who are working in their facilities. However, most of the folks who work in tribal facilities that would be in those spaces are usually commissioned corps officers who are exempted class of employees, so they're able to continue working. If it continues longer, I'm not sure exactly what may happen, but typically the tribes receive that money in advance for their shares for their to work on their facilities. So typically tribal facilities aren't really as impacted by the shutdown.
Okay, thank you, AC. Phone lines are open, 1-800-99-NATIVE. Give us a call right now. We want to hear from some listeners. Let us know what your thoughts are with regard to this federal shutdown that began yesterday. First federal shutdown in 7 years. Is it impacting you? Is it impacting family or community members that you know? Let us know. Give us a call, 1-800-996-2848. We have Sue Parton in the studio today in Albuquerque. She is the president of the Federation of Indian Services Employees, and this is a union that represents Native employees in the federal system. Sue, can you give us an estimate? How many federal union members right now, Indian Service Union members, are now off the job because of this shutdown?
Yes. We were told yesterday we represent 4 agencies under the Department of Interior, under the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs. We represent all the federal employees in Bureau of Indian Education, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, and the Bureau of Trust Funds Administration. So total, we represent about 5,500 federal employees. The majority of those employees are Native American, but their jobs were developed to provide services to all of the Native American people. And out of those, in the Bureau of Indian Education has been deemed to be exempted from the shutdown. So all of our schools that are operated by the BIE will continue to function at least until the end of the school year, and all of the BIE employees have been exempted. So then that leaves us with Asia, BIA, and BTFA. And out of those people, we have about 1,600 who are on furlough starting yesterday. But we have 2,087 who were deemed to be accepted. So those 2,087 are still reporting to work, still doing their essential duties, but not getting paid.
Okay. What are you hearing from any of these employees, either those that have already been furloughed or those who are deemed accepted, as you describe it?
Well, the major thing that we're hearing about, and that we as the union, we have no answers to give them, and it just breaks my heart because they are concerned about the uncertainty of the future. I myself have been a federal employee for 47 years in the federal service. So I've been through many of these shutdowns and continuing resolutions. And there's always been a glimmer of hope till now. And so the uncertainty of how to face the future based on what we're hearing and what's happening from the executive branch of the federal government, who has total control over what happens to our employees and the Native people that they are there to serve.
Sue, help us understand what happens here on an individual level. How does furlough affect a Native federal employee? How does it affect their family or even just their overall community's well-being?
Right. Well, like I said, as a union president, I have to focus, because it's my job, I have to focus on the lives of our federal employees. But as a Native American woman, I know that these employees, their job is specifically to provide services to Native American communities and individuals. So anytime that there's a shutdown and the employees go on furlough, this furlough, for example, we got notice late yesterday, that we were given a 30-day furlough. And I would say that about 85 to 90% of the employees that we represent in Indian services are Native people themselves. And I also believe that a great majority of those, including myself, usually live paycheck to paycheck. So if the 30 days holds, that means there are 2 upcoming paychecks that our employees will not receive. So they are scrambling to figure out how can they live their lives and do what's best for themselves and for their families.
Let's go to the phones where we have Christina in Oklahoma who is listening online. Hello, Christina. You are on the air. Thanks for calling.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Christina. What's your comment?
I am one of the affected employees, and I am a single mom. This is my only source of income. I barely survived the 35-day shutdown previously. I live paycheck to paycheck. It's very, very hard for myself to do the services that we need to provide to our tribal members when we're shut down. It has greatly affected myself and my family. Gives me lots of anxiety and how I'm going to pay the next bill. I do live paycheck to paycheck. It's very disheartening that I'm having to go through this again.
Mm-hmm. Oh, geez, Christina, I really appreciate you calling in today and just being so truthful and sharing this. And I imagine there are many other folks right now in the exact same position, and just hang in there, please, very much. And Aaron Payman, I want to bring you back into the conversation because listening to Christina talk, I mean, it's easy to get kind of bogged down in the policy and in the politics of what's going on, right? But we have to remember these are real people. our relatives, our native relatives across the country who can be impacted like Christina is. And right now we've got this situation where each political party blames the other. And I just want to ask you, I mean, what can be done here politically? And is one side or the other better at getting their message out right now? And what do we need to think about going forward in terms of just this political jockeying that's going around? And here it's impacting real people in real lives every day.
Yeah, so tribal leaders have to be very careful and be in advocating for upholding the Treaty and Trust obligation to be non-political, and we do that. We do that actually really well, and try to educate both sides of the aisle. I think they're equally irresponsible when it comes to enacting budgets. We don't have that luxury back home. We have to balance our budgets, and don't play those kind of games. And it's become normal course now to do this gamesmanship right up to the 11th hour. And this time is different. Your previous caller, my heart goes out to her and all the federal employees, especially the ones that are tribal, that are serving Indian people. This time is different because if you read Project 2025, which President Trump disavowed through the campaign, had said that he had nothing to do with, it has everything that was in that plan is coming to fruition. This plan to dismantle federal government has an attraction to people who pay taxes and people who are frustrated with politics, but their frustration is misplaced. We need to build government, strengthen government, mend it, not end it. But I'm really nervous about where we're going. Dismantling the federal government, dismantling the social safety net, and really just eroding the fabric of our Constitution, our rights to free speech, right to freedom from religion, assembly. Right now we're facing threats by the National Guard and the military for exercising our right to assemble and our right to speech. So things are very different this time. And if I could, I wanted to circle back. This is a fight worth having, though. And so while, there's blame going around and some people are now second-guessing the Democrats for using the only tool they have available right now. Under normal times, you might be able to negotiate with a president that has a heart that would not cut key health care. And so, while Indian Health Services is not the only way we get health care, we also get health care through the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
And so the cuts that are in the big beautiful bill that was celebrated, like it's a big celebration, those will have devastating impacts on our ability to drive third-party revenue and collect revenue. And the vast majority of our members who live away from the reservation, 2/3 of my members do not live on or near the res, so they do not get Indian Health Services. They could go to another tribal health clinic, but the vast majority are in urban areas. So God, pray for your urban Indians, because right now they're hurting, and Indians that live away from home. So this is a fight worth having. We have to draw the line in the sand, and we have to protect that healthcare and the subsidies. It's proposed to double. The cost for the Medicaid expansion is going to double, and that's by design. Because once it doubles, then Americans will think, well, geez, it's too expensive to have the ACA, and then public opinion will erode there. But cutting off 20 million people from healthcare or eroding the funding that goes to the ACA has the same effect. And that's by design by, the OMB director and the Project 2025, and going all the way back to the Contract on America.
All right, thank you, Aaron. Sue Parton with the Federation of Indian Service Employees. I want to go back to you and the caller, Christina, a few minutes ago from Oklahoma, obviously distressed, obviously worried about the future. Are there resources available either through your union or other entities to assist some of these furloughed employees right now?
Well, we are affiliated nationally with the American Federation of Teachers. And then in the 2018 shutdown, which was somewhat normal to most of the other shutdowns we've been through, they were able to provide places where employees could reach out to. They also were able to offer the members trauma counseling, because this is very traumatic to our members who are without a job and without pay. They're on furlough, yes, but again, like the previous person said, there's no guarantees. We've never heard rhetoric like, Trump wants to do mass firings, which could start as early as today, as we speak. He could be issuing orders to his secretary to slash jobs. And even if the shutdown ends, they are still in line to have mass reduction in forces in all of our 4 agencies that we represent. So I understand that some of the credit unions, the federal credit unions, are also looking to assist people who have been furloughed with low interest loans. I haven't been told the names of those, but I know that those have been available to them in the past. And some people, if they are fortunate enough to live on their reservations, they have indicated that they would ask to see if there's any tribal help that they could get to meet their needs financially.
All right. Thank you, Sue. We're going to take another short break. We will come back. We'll continue the conversation, and we'll be speaking with Mike Stopp, who is the president and CEO of 7-Star Holdings. He's in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So listeners, stay with us, and anyone else who would like to join the conversation, give us a call. 1-800-996-2848. Let us know how this shutdown is impacting you, impacting your family, impacting your community, services that you're concerned about. This is your forum, Native America Calling, 1-800-99-NATIVE.
The annual 2025 Indian Nations Conservation Alliance National Conference happens October 14th in Las Vegas. This 3-day gathering of tribal leaders, professionals, youth, and community members unites voices and action around conservation, innovation, and indigenous stewardship of Indian lands and resources. The Indian National Finals Rodeo will be there too. Info and registration at inca-tcd.org. INCA supports this show.
You have attuned to Native America Calling. The current federal government shutdown. Is this an issue you're concerned about? Or are you going about your life business as usual? Did the last shutdown in 2018 affect you and your community? Do you think the shutdown impacts Native people differently regarding whether or not they live on tribal lands or off reservation in a city or urban area perhaps? Albuquerque, Rapid City, Denver, Anchorage. There's still time to join this conversation, so give us a call, 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. We have Mike Stopp on the line in Tulsa, Oklahoma, president and CEO of 7-Star Holdings. And Mike, thank you again for joining our conversation today. And let's talk a little bit more about the congressional stalemate that we are experiencing right now. And I think some listeners, some taxpayers might think, every time the fiscal calendar runs out, we're in a situation like this. Is there a better solution than a government shutdown?
Second, about some of the other previous topics, I won't take very long. But the first thing I want to say is Christine, I'm so very sorry for what you're going through. You know, when I was a sophomore or junior in high school, 95, 96, during that shutdown, my mom was an IHS nurse, and it was a single income family. And it was a real challenge. She didn't know what she was going to do. We weren't getting food on the table. We had to borrow from family. And Christmas that year, frankly, sucked because she didn't get a paycheck until late January. We were lucky enough that the tribe issued what commodities they had available to federal workforce, and our local grocery store actually extended a line of credit. And so we could buy groceries after a few weeks of that going on. Then in the 2018 shutdown, I was the chief of staff for Congressman Mullen at the time, now Senator Mullen. And I was telling people about my experience. It surprises me how few people on Capitol Hill really understand what a shutdown does to the federal workforce. I was one of the few that had any experience in that, feeling it as a family member of a federal employee. And so I think, again, like most things that need to happen on Capitol Hill, it's about an education about what really happens when we do these things. And so I have a pretty good understanding of it, and my heart does go out to the federal employees who are caught in this. Politically, we're in a different position. It's strange. The position seems to have flipped, where in the previous shutdowns that we've seen, it's the Republicans are asking for policy changes in what is simply an appropriations bill that should be quick to pass because it's just a simple appropriations bill. The appropriations have already been agreed to. In fact, these appropriations we're talking to were actually done under the Democrats and under a Biden administration. There aren't major changes in this particular CR that the Republicans have put forward. It was actually a major feat for Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, to get the Republicans to pass a clean CR. If you will think back a few years ago when we were doing this again, and Kevin McCarthy was Speaker of the House, he had to lean on Democrats to get a clean CR passed out of the House, and he got fired for it. The Republicans fired him as Speaker, and he ultimately retired because of that decision. For Mike Johnson to be able to get this through a raucous Republican caucus as a clean CR and over to the Senate is a feat in itself that I don't think people talk about. You ask if there's other ways to do things. I think that's the number one conversation we've all been having the last couple of weeks, knowing that we're going into this, knowing that there was going to be a shutdown. I think so many folks are talking about why do we do this? Why do we keep coming to this point? We need to find another way to do the appropriations process so this isn't the case. One of the other things that we can change, is, as I heard some of the other speakers, is this is where I think we can really make changes when it comes to funding Indian programs, tribal programs, and that is these 638 contracts. Quite a few of them are in healthcare, but there's 638 contracts throughout Indian policy. And I will tell you that the Trump administration does want to continue pushing those because they see the success of them. They think it's a better way of the local government, the people closest, managing the money. We could get those. I think it would be palatable to get 638 contracts as a whole protected, maybe in an advanced appropriations context like we did with IHS funds, versus trying to get everything that a tribe gets from the federal government, maybe starting there. I think that is a place that if we could all come to an agreement that we could probably push through Congress and say, hey, these 638 contracts, they're part of the treaty and trust responsibility. These tribes are taking it on themselves. We're asking them to do this. They need to have that money so they can continue doing it. It's something we owe them. And I think that's a good place to start having those conversations. And now's the time to do it because people are seeing it. I will say, of the tribes that I've heard from, I'm very impressed of the lessons many of them have learned from 2018, and they are better prepared today than they were last time. So that is good news to see.
Mike, Democrats could have agreed to a timeline extension. Why do you think they didn't?
Well, as previous speaker noted, when you're in the minority, you don't have a lot of tools to push the government on. And quite frankly, this is often why you see Republicans using the CR as a tool as well, is that it's the only thing you can hang up. And part of that is because of the 60-vote threshold in the Senate. So you need 60 votes to break a filibuster, what they call cloture. You need 60 votes to break cloture. And so that's like a supermajority. So even though they have a simple majority in the Senate, the Republicans don't have full control. And so the minority, which is the Democrats, can hold up a bill like this to try to get some of their priorities either looked at or added to the bill. But often what you found, and this is what I tell my Republican friends, is that shutdowns don't actually help you accomplish your goals. There's some messaging that goes out, but at the end of the day, very seldom do the policy position that you came into to hold out for, it doesn't usually get accomplished through this mechanism. But everybody seems to think this is the one tool I have, I need to act on it if I'm in the minority. But if you look at historically, it hasn't been an effective tool at all.
And Mike, the messaging, I think that's really key because a lot of people listening right now might be having a hard time kind of making heads or tails over which party, which side is doing a better job of getting their message out. And just overall, like, how can we as just regular taxpayers, regular people, native people, tell who has the upper hand here, and any insights in terms of how this is going to play out?
Well, I'll be honest. My personal assessment of this is the Republicans have the upper hand. Their messaging has been, we have a clean CR. We've done this. I don't think people, unless they're watching the Hill every day, they don't realize actually what a big lift that was for Mike Johnson, the Speaker, to get it out of a Republican-controlled House. A clean CR was actually very impressive for him to get that done. When you start to ask for policy changes inside an short-term appropriations package like this, I think that's where we run into problems. It's the same issue we had with the Republicans trying to revoke parts of ACA, doing the same thing. It didn't work. None of that got revoked. The border bill, the border wall didn't get added to this bill. It was negotiated later. So one of the only good things that comes out of this is that you can get the other side to at least agree to negotiations on your issues after a bill like this is passed. The Democrats have not previously shown stomach for a long-term government shutdown or a shutdown at all. Chuck Schumer, I think if you'll recall, in March got in a lot of trouble for agreeing to a CR back then without holding the line. You've already seen some Democrat people who have started voting for the clean CR because they don't want the shutdown to last long. So I think you're going to see more and more of the moderate Democrat senators go over to the other side to get the government open as soon as possible.
Okay,
and
Mike,
that's kind of where we're at.
Several times you use the abbreviation CR, continuing resolution. Can you explain that in a little bit more detail for our listeners who might not be familiar with some of the lingo used on Capitol Hill frequently?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're looking at right now is CR, which is what is called a continuing resolution, which is what the Congress uses to pass appropriations to continue the spending that we're at. It's continuing from appropriations bills that came before them. There are 12 appropriations bills that have to come out of the House and Senate to fund the government. A continuing resolution basically just says we're going to continue the government spending at its current levels according to our last time we passed appropriations. And so most of the time these days, it is a continuing resolution that funds the government. Very seldom do you see all 12 appropriations bills actually make it through both chambers before the end of a Congress. So the continuing resolution basically just says we agree to keep the government funded at the level that it was before it ran out of funding. So that's what people mean when they say CR.
Thank you, Mike. The last shutdown, we've mentioned this before, it lasted until January. Do you think we're in for another long haul?
Don't. I really don't. As I mentioned before, I don't think the Democrats have the stomach for this. They're going to start hearing from federal employees. They're going to hear from constituents at home. There are those who say we don't believe that shutdowns accomplish our policy hopes because that's historically accurate. And so you're going to see more and more moderate Democrats go over to voting for the current version that the House hit to the Senate. And if they don't do it on their own, I don't think Leader Schumer is going to be able to hold out much longer either. So my guess is 1 to 2 weeks. And quite frankly, my guess is going to be Monday. They're going to vote on it, and we're going to be back in business.
Okay.
I hope so. Anyway.
All right. Okay. Aaron Payman, I want to go back to you because let's say it's over. Let's say Monday, as Mike predicts, I'll use that term, predicts that it might be over by Monday. What kind of work do tribes and Indian service employees have to do to get back on track? I mean, it seems like such a huge disruption. What happens then?
So one of the messagings that is coming out of the White House is to blame Democrats for holding up the CR because they're trying to provide health care for migrants or immigrants. And that's just not true. The legislation that was passed in the Big Beautiful Bill that's celebrated is been in the works for several years since Obamacare was enacted, and that is to begin to dismantle the funding to Obamacare. So the immediate challenge is if Democrats do relent, because, let's face it, they're politicians, they're worried about their next election, then it puts us right back to square one, and that is how do we ensure that the subsidies that should go to the Affordable Care Act will continue? And why that's relevant to Indian tribes, again, earlier I explained that the vast majority of our people do not live on or near the reservation. The vast majority of our Indian people are not covered under Indian Health Services, and they depend on the Affordable Care Act. And so, if we were fully funded under the Indian Health Service, no matter where we live, if we had a portability card, just like veterans, defense and veterans, then we wouldn't need the Affordable Care Act. But we fought for years to get that level of funding. We're vastly underfunded. AC could fill you in. We are only funded about $9 billion a year. The established need is well over $60 billion just for Indian Health Services, just for the reservation areas alone. So we get right back to where we were at with trying to figure out how are we going to survive these drastic cuts in the big, beautiful bill that are designed to dismantle the Affordable Care Act. When they tried to do it before, and your previous guest talked about how that wasn't successful, it wasn't, because Americans do not want the Affordable Care Act eliminated. But the end run, or the strategy with cutting the funding and the subsidies, is to make it not palatable, so then people will erode the support for the Affordable Care Act and eventually repeal the Affordable Care Act. So that's what the long-term plan is. So our long-term plan's got to be bigger than that, more long-term. We think in 7 generations, and upholding the treaty and trust obligation in whatever format we can. So tribes will have to regroup and think about how we can make that happen.
All right. Sue Parton, back to you. We heard Aaron Payment mention, so many urban Native people who do not depend on the Indian Health Service. What do you know about your union employees in terms of where they get health care and what their concerns are with regard to the shutdown and whether or not they're going to get the health care they might need?
Well, it's just like the previous speaker indicated. It depends on where you live. Our employees work at 350 different work sites in 23 states. So it depends on where they live. People who live here in Albuquerque that are federal employees, if they're Native, yes, they can go to IHS. But if they're not of one of their serviceable tribes, then they have to pay out of their own pocket many times. If they're given a referral to go to a specialist, Indian Health Service won't cover them because they're not a member of a tribe that this particular IHS unit covers. So it's very difficult. And in my opinion, a lot of our employees are going to just say, you know what, forget it. I've got to pay my bills. I've got to feed my family. I don't think I can afford health insurance. And
all right.
It's going to be very devastating.
Okay, AC Locklear with the National Indian Health Board. We've got about a minute before we have to wrap up. I'm going to give you the last word. Anything else you want to add to our conversation to educate our listeners today?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of what everyone's alluding to. This is really hard on all of our workforce. And through the Indian Health Service and across the federal government, we want our people in these positions representing us. And when they get hired into these positions and they're constantly faced with this looming threat of not having employment, not being paid, how can we keep our people in these positions in ways that can help benefit our communities? So that's something that's always at the top of our mind, is how we're protecting our workforce in times like this and how we're supporting them and how we're making sure that they continue to be able to work for the federal government and represent us in all these different places.
All right. And with that, we are out of time. So we're going to have to wrap up this conversation today. But of course, the dialogue can continue if you go to our website, nativeamericacalling.com. If you go to any of our social media platforms, such as Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, you can comment, like, post. Tell us about this show, what you thought, what the key takeaways are, and what do you think the discussion is going forward. Please engage with us here at Native America Calling. And of course, thank you to our guests who joined the conversation, Aaron Payment, Sue Parton, Mike Stopp, and AC Locklear. Join us again tomorrow as we add 2 Oklahoma singer-songwriters to our Native playlist. We'll have Choctaw musician Samantha Crane and Cherokee artist Ken Pomeroy, both of whom have new music to share. Don't miss it. I'm Sean Spruce. You've been listening to the one, the only Native America Calling.
Support by AARP. If someone asks you to buy gift cards to pay off debt, it's a scam. Imposters will claim your Social Security number's at risk, or your utility company will stop service due to late payments, or you won the lottery and only need to pay some upfront costs. They'll say the fastest way is to buy gift cards and share the numbers on the back. Anyone who tells you to pay a debt with a gift card is a scammer. More information on gift card scams at aarp.org/giftcards.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.